Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with Drink a Beer and Play a Game, and today we're checking out Mighty Number 9, or as I like to call it, Cheap Mega Man Imitation.
Originally released in June 2016, this game was Keiji Inafune's first big project after leaving Capcom. And holy crap, what a development cycle. It's pretty infamous. So, long story short, it started off as a Kickstarter that gave concept art that got everyone excited. It raised over $3 million, got a ton of stretch goals added, and then later on it got some big name publishers to add even more money to it, with even more stretch goals. In between its development, it had another Kickstarter that failed miserably, and then you get to the releases where the interpreter for Inafune said it's better than nothing. You had the an anime fan on prom night stuff. There's a whole shitload of backstory and it left a lot of people pissed off. It came out for systems such as, Steam, Linux, Windows, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, the Wii U, and a whole bunch of other shit. A lot of stuff that was promised and never came out. It's a clusterfuck. But the version we're playing is off the Xbox One. Let's get into it. Is it as bad as people say?
Yep.
Well, yeah, kind of.
It's going to be hard to go through this review and not make references to Mega Man, but let's get that out. Me and Jim are going to say that multiple times. And as soon as you look at the graphics, it's very apparent. However, Jim and I both looked at this, and for a game that had the development cycle that Jim touched upon, and considering the fact that you had a guy who worked at Capcom, this game looks like it could have been developed for the PS2. Honestly, the graphics just don't hold up. They're not artistic enough to stand alone in a sea of other side-scrolling shoot-'em platformers. So while overall there's nothing specific really terrible about the graphics, we do acknowledge there are some pretty decent coloring and the animations don't look bad, but it just still comes off so simplistic, and considering what was promised, it just doesn't deliver, and it is very forgettable backgrounds, repeating enemies like you would see in most of these games, but I don't know, everything just seems so generic that it's really forgettable. Even the boss designs, while some are kind of interesting, they didn't blow us away. So overall, we both gave it a 4. That might seem harsh, but as I said before, we rate games based on games that are comparable at the time, and we've seen some recent side-scrollers that were developed by indie developers that look amazing. This would be lucky if it passed for a PS2 game like I mentioned earlier. So as far as beer, I'm starting it off with 3 for letting a lot of people down and for Jim having to buy this piece of shit.
Yeah! So the sound is a part where Brian and I really differ a lot. I guess I'll start with the voice acting. And a lot of people out there really bashed the voice acting, and I didn't mind it as much. I thought it was serviceable, it was fine. A lot of people thought it was horrific and annoying, which I can definitely see, but I don't know, I think this was just going for a more kiddie kind of audience, and if you keep that in mind, it's not bad. The music I actually liked a lot, and it was actually composed by people who worked on the old NES era Mega Man, so the quality's definitely there. And a cool little thing is in the options menu, you can switch between 8-bit renditions of the music and the full, fully composed versions that you get default in the game, which I think is a really cool touch. It's perfectly fine. Brian wasn't as crazy about the music, where I liked it a lot more, so that's why his score is an average 5, while mine's an above average 8. I liked it, Brian thought it was okay, and I don't know, that's probably where you'll lie. It's nothing horrific, but depending on your taste, nothing spectacular either. As far as beer goes, I'll just give it 1 happy beer for giving the choice between the 2 music styles.
Alright, for a game that imitates Mega Man, you would think the control would be a little tighter and a little smoother. Unfortunately, in this game, we just ran into a few specific issues. Now, one, I will say the control scheme overall is very simplistic. You shoot, you jump, and you have a dash button. But the big problem really comes in to once you start defeating the bosses and getting their powers, you gotta hold X and then cycle through. It's just not as smooth, and since this is a game that is made for modern controllers, there's enough buttons and enough different configurations, they could have figured out a way to make that just a little smoother. Other than that though, we felt like the jumping was sometimes a little too pixel perfect, and there just felt like a sluggishness to your character. And for a character that all you're doing 90% of the game dashing forward, if you still feel like you're kind of slow, I don't know. To us, it just felt like a problem. The shooting had a semi-minor delay, but once you get some of the powers, it becomes real negligible. So we didn't knock it too many points for that. But overall, once again, being such a big Mega Man fan, I just felt like it did a disservice to a shooter of that style. So overall, we both gave it a 6. It's clearly doable, but it's just not as smooth as we would like a game like this. So I'm going to add 2 beers. 1 for not utilizing more of the buttons that are available to you on your controller, and 2 for just having that little bit of lag that was annoying as dick.
Alright, the gameplay. This is really the spot where this game was just the biggest missed opportunity. Because there are times when I thought the game was legitimately fun, but it just had so many things that held it back. Let's talk with an easy one and just the cheap deaths you can have in this game. There's certain spots that just require such pinpoint precision and memorization that it'll take you more tries than it ever should because it just becomes such a pain in the dick. And then there's other parts like, well, take for instance this part of these 2 big-ass spinning wheels. So they say to use the crouch dash. Well, guess the fuck what? At first, they don't tell you how to do it. So you're just dicking around trying to do your normal dash, and you kill yourself again and again. Then when you finally figure it out, you have to be standing at the exact right spot, or you're not going to be getting all the way through. And while this is probably the most extreme case, there's other little set pieces in the game that you really have to just hit all the right spots at the right times. And while that is true to a Mega Man game, the Mega Man games just flowed better, and you had a chance of not having such noob traps. A big issue I had in general is the fact that the game promotes 2 different playstyles, really. For the most part, it wants you to dash through the game as quick as you can, rack up these big combos, but then it has these other parts that just stop you dead in your tracks, either with noob traps, as I've already mentioned, or just these rooms that they lock you in and you have to kill pointless enemies. A lot of the level designs just kind of basic and meh in general. Some are better than others, some have better gimmicks than others, but for the most part, it's okay at best. As you go through levels and you use your dash mechanic, which is basically the main gimmick of the game, if you do it enough, you can build up extra, health regeneration points, and you can also get little boosts like faster movement, stronger shots, shit like that. And while they're definitely good things to have, I never found myself being able to keep the combos up or powers for too long because the levels don't let you. It's just too crappily designed, to say the least. There's some multiplayer modes, and which include basically either fighting each other or challenge modes, I think, because guess what? There is no multiplayer component to this game active anymore. I tried to get into some multiplayer games, and it just wasn't happening. And I only played this maybe 4 months after release, and the game was dead at that point. The boss fights can be pretty fun, and just like the old Mega Man, using certain boss powers from old bosses helps you defeat other ones quicker. Overall, it's a game that just could have been so much better than it is, obviously, and it just sucks because I did have a lot of fun with it, but there were times where I just got so incredibly frustrated with it, so I couldn't give it any more than a 6. It's just barely above average from how it plays. I know I'm giving it a higher score than a lot of other people did, but the few parts where I had fun in this, I had a lot of fun. When it comes to beer, I gotta give it 3 beers. There's just so many things between the noob traps, the dead online component, and just the fact it should have been so much better.
The originality is a really easy category to talk about because there virtually is none. We've said it's an imitation of Mega Man games. Didn't really add anything new, even that dash mechanic we've seen in other games before. The only reason we didn't give this just a 1 is because this was probably the first and the largest newsworthy Kickstarter games that actually went into development and we saw it. Nowadays, Kickstarter failures and games are a commonplace, but when we first heard about this was the first time that it really opened our eyes to it. Not saying we're experts, and I'm sure someone on here is going to correct us with a game that came out before that was just as big, but for us, we gave it points. So, we both gave it a 2. As far as beer, I'm not going to really add any, because listen, we know there's no originality here, but they were very deliberate. They wanted to make a different type of Mega Man game. They were ambitious, just didn't work out so well.
Alright, the replayability. I'll keep it quick because I've already hit a lot of the major points. There's the online component that you really can't do because the community's dead, if it ever really started. There's the 30-some challenge modes, which, will take a little bit of time to get through the entire way because, much like the regular game, it requires some pinpoint precision. And then there's the fact you can go back through the game and try and, get A ratings in all of them, or you can play through all of the games as the girl character. Shit, I even forget her name at this point. I played it a month ago. Doesn't matter. The game's not worth it. So, Brian gave it a 4, and I gave it a 5. And when it comes to beers, I'll just give it 1 beer for the dead online component.
So overall, I think you got the impression for how we feel about this game. It's nowhere near perfect, and it was a letdown for many people's expectations. But if you really are a fan of Mega Man games, or if you're like Jim and you didn't grow up with Mega Man games and you come at it with a fresh start, you may actually find enjoyment in this game.
Full disclosure, we didn't kickstart it either, so we didn't have those expectations put into it.
With all of that being said, no, it's not the worst game in the world, but it just doesn't hold up today that well. I gave it a 4, Jim gave it a 5. He had a little more fun with it for the reasons he discussed during gameplay. So when we combined all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 5.3. We're probably the most lax on this game than other people, while we know some people actually are starch defenders of this game. Whatever your opinion, just try to be as non-biased as possible if you do decide to pick this one up, but don't be like Jim and pay too much for it.
I only paid $15 for it, and that was like 2 months after it came out.
That sounds like $13 too many.
Yeah, you're probably right.
When it comes to beer pairing, I didn't want to give it the best kind of beer out there, but I wanted to give it something from a brewery that we trust. So, I chose the Sam Adams Rebel IPA. Listen, it's not the best IPA, and it's certainly not the best beer that Sam Adams has to offer, but it's still pretty damn good, and it'll pair nicely with a game like this, because you don't want to get too drunk since you need all that pinpoint accuracy, and it's not so good that you're going to want to keep taking breaks. It's a nice in-between, sort of like this game. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.